Good evening, everyone. This is June 6th, Hell's Kitchen Democrats General Meeting. My name is Christine Gorman, and we have a great lineup this evening of folks who are going to address us. And as soon as they come on, we will, interrupt a little bit to accommodate their schedules. So I'm going to put the agenda for tonight's meeting in the chat and give you all a chance. And I'm going to stop my dog from digging you're digging to China, Chester. I don't know if you can hear the digging in the background. So, but if you can, welcome, Rob Madsen. I understand you're a new member, and you met Heather at the 9th Avenue Food Festival. So welcome, Rob.
Thank you.
So anyway, we have the agenda in the chat, and I will also put in the minutes from our last meeting in the chat that you can download. And we'll start first with the agenda. I will ask if everyone could take a quick look at the agenda and approve the agenda or make any additions that might be needed to the agenda. Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the agenda?
Motion.
I see Kat making a motion, Ruby seconding. All in favor of accepting the agenda, raise your hand digitally or okay, it passes. Good. Then now we'll move on to the minutes from the last meeting. And as I noted with Danny, Eric was able to attend towards the end of the meeting, so did reply to some of the questions about zoning and casinos. So that will be in an updated minutes. And then the item 6E on Simon Rosenbaum was actually Simon Rosenberg, and we were inviting everyone to a Zoom meeting with him on May 23rd. But those are the two changes I saw. Did anyone else see any changes or corrections that needed to be made in the minutes from May 2nd? Okay, not seeing anybody. So I'll entertain a motion to accept these minutes as amended.
Make a motion to accept the amended minutes.
And Stephanie, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hands. The motions are accepted. So thank you, Danny. As usual, you do such a wonderful job on our minutes. And so now we'll move to the agenda. Our guest speakers tonight are Tom Duane and possibly Deborah Glick. Tom said, Tom, actually, many of us know, was first elected to the New York State Senate in 1998. And he became the Senate's first openly gay and actually openly HIV positive member. We're expecting him to come on in a little bit. Whenever he does come on, we'll go right to him. And then we also hope to hear from Assembly Member Deborah Glick, who is in session and probably will be until the wee hours tonight. But she's hoping to be able to take a break around between 7:15 and 7:30 to join our Zoom meeting. So while we're waiting for them to come on, we might as well keep going down the agenda. And so the next item is Paul Devlin and the district leaders report. So Paul has many things to tell us.
Many. And first, I want to thank the executive committee and the membership for setting up tonight's meeting. I think the dialogue we had to kind of create the conversation was very kind of fruitful, and we navigated around, in circles, but we got to a point where it's like, let's bring in people who are at the forefront of the LGBTQ fights politically many decades ago, and give us their perspective on what it was like then and what it's like today. And so particularly for Pride Month, I think it's a great thing that we're doing, and I'm glad that that came together. I want to mention that the Manhattan Democratic Party is doing a fundraiser tomorrow, I believe. So if anybody's interested in going to the Manhattan Democratic Party fundraiser, that would be helpful. As you know, they fund our judicial convention. They help work with clubs to get people going on things. They do a variety of different things. And in this year, I think it's important that the Democrats show a lot of strength. It's easy to say that Manhattan, like the county leader often says, New York County, also known as Manhattan, is the only county in the state that has 0 elected Republicans. So it's quite an accomplishment that we're, the one county that can do that. The flip side of that, though, is sometimes we feel like our vote isn't needed, we don't need to participate, we don't need to do things, and that can be problematic. And so I just want to remind everybody that we do need to stay engaged and involved. And to that end, we've been kind of adopted 2 congressional districts, and we'll get into more of that later with our activities. But we know that Joe Biden will win here in Manhattan, but we need to make sure that we get enough votes here to pump up his numbers statewide. And then we need to make sure that we get the 4 congressional districts that flipped from Democrat to Republican back in the hands of Democrats, and potentially get Hakeem Jeffries as our speaker. So keeping very active and engaged is important. And that leads into my next point, which is, on June 25th, there's a Democratic primary. Because we here in the 75th have worked so colloquially and collectively, none of our Democratic candidates have opponents. So Kirsten Gillibrand, Jerry Nadler, Brett Holman-Siegel, Tony Simone, our judges, our judicial delegates and alternates, nobody has an opponent because we're all getting along this year. And we very consciously decided to get along and not expend resources in this critical year doing infighting and making a battle. So what that means logistically is that because there's no competition, they're not printing ballots for our district, which means there is no primary voting going on. So you received, I think last meeting we talked about, we received these brochures from the Board of Elections talking about what's on the ballot and all of that. The fact is that had to go out statutorily before the date that the ballots were finalized. So it causes a little bit of confusion when people get information in the mail that says your voting place is this, the primary is on June 25th, and if anybody goes to a voting place, it's not going to be open. So that glitch in the system is kind of inconvenient, but that's why it's important that we, as the leading Democrats in this neighborhood, are in tune to that. We know that. So if people ask us questions, you can explain it. So no voting in the 75th Assembly District in the June primary. We often use the word primary versus election, and I want to remind everybody that an election is different than a primary. The primary is the Democratic Party activists deciding who will be the Democratic nominee in the election. So with the exception of party positions, all the other seats, Congress, Senate, State Senate, Assembly, all of those seats will be up for election in November. And as of June 25th, they will all be qualified to be on the November ballot. So that means all of our judicial delegates and alternates, we're not going to have to go out and actually vote for, which means we can spend our resources and time writing postcards, getting on buses, making phone calls to the congressional districts that need to be swung. The Judicial Nominating Convention, a lot of us here are the delegates and alternates to the convention. That as always, is scheduled for the week of August 8th to 14th. So I'd ask people to keep that week kind of marked off on their calendars if you're a delegate or alternate. We've had it in the past at the SVA auditorium on 23rd Street, but they're going through some reconstruction, and so that space may not be available for us. So it's quite frustrating that, we know when the convention is every year. Why can't we book this further in advance? Like, why is it always the last minute that we get this? And it's a matter of logistics, right? Like, the space just isn't available. So now we have to find a different space that is accessible to subway and public transit, that has ADA compliance issues, all of those other things, and doesn't charge a bucket load of money for us to use the space. That goes back to my fundraising theme of earlier. So lots going on. I am very happy that this club has, so engaged, that we are doing work in other districts, that we have been so cooperative with other Democrats such that we're not expending resources fighting with each other. So it's going to be a good year. So that's my report. I tried to stretch out. I thought we'd see Tom come on. In the meantime, Tom would never come in. So I talked a lot longer than I had anticipated.
Yeah, I think Alita is trying to troubleshoot that. Anyway, thank you very much, Paul. And so now we'll go to Jackie, who's going to tell us about all the great postcarding parties.
And Jack is muted.
Sorry. We got out to a great start on Memorial Day weekend. We wrote 300 postcards for Pat Ryan, who is New York District 18. And this Saturday, we're going to be writing postcards for Josh Riley, who is New York District 19. Those are for 18, he is the incumbent, but he barely won. And for 19, Josh Riley ran the last time and he barely lost. So this weekend will be Josh Riley. And I'm thrilled to say that a campaign has opened up that we can do on June 15th. For a while there, we weren't finding anybody, but we have one for Sherrod Brown. And this is also very important that we maintain the Senate. Biden would have such a fight if we can get him elected and then lose the Senate. And Sherrod Brown has great track record in Ohio. He perfectly suits them. So if you can come, you could either this Saturday, we have a list of people for this Saturday, but certainly for next Saturday, please email me because we need to write those postcards and we enjoy each other's company too.
Jackie, can you put your email or in the chat so people have it?
I can. You're probably going to find it better in the newsletter that went out today, but I'll add my
Also,
email.
I just want to add it's from 1 to 4 this Saturday and 1 to 4 the following Saturday.
Yes,
And
and if you can only come for part of that, that's fine too.
And where is it?
I'm not going to say because I want people to contact me, and then I have an actual list. It's very important that I know exactly who's coming, so if I have to contact them, I can. I'm no fool.
Okay, Marietta, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't do well with a lot of people writing postcards, but I will write a lot by myself. So if I can get some of the postcards and you don't mind me not being there, I will do it.
We love to see you, but we understand.
So just let me know where to pick them up.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I sent the wrong thing.
I think you sent your telephone number.
I did. I sent my phone number, but here. So there's my email.
Okay, so now we have Jackie's email and phone number. And just a reminder, we were able, because of our fundraising, to buy and whoa, is on there twice. I think there's an echo. And as well the postage. So that's good.
We beat the deadline, and the plan is to do 2 postcarding parties in July and another 2 in August. So we're going to just keep keep at it.
Great. Yeah, the deadline being that postage is going up and okay, postage is going up this summer. And so, but by buying forever stamps, we were able to save money. Great. Any questions for Jackie? Any other questions for Jackie? All right, and I see Deborah Glick on the Zoom live from Albany. So I'm going to turn it over to her to address us. And thank you so much. Please unmute yourself. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm in a gorgeous backdrop. This is, it's wonderful to work in a castle, particularly later at night when it's a little quieter. But I want to wish everybody a happy Pride Month. And I'm sure everybody saw that we now will be changing the Christopher Street station, adding the National Stonewall Monument to the designation of the Christopher Street Station on the number 1, which is exciting. I know that it's a very crazy time, and the last day and a half we've had this enormous shockwave over the congestion pricing change and endless conferences trying to figure out what we might do to respond or what we possibly can. And I don't think there's a resolution at the moment. And I guess to some extent the MTA board itself hasn't weighed in. So I would just say that the most important thing is that ultimately we need to ensure that the continued improvement of mass transit is funded, fully funded, so that we can get people onto mass transit and off the streets. I know, I chair the Environment Committee, and I know that people are reasonably anxious about seeing everything happen, but honestly, not everything can happen all at once. And so I'm hopeful that tomorrow we'll do my Packaging Reduction Act, which would be a very big, major thing. But there are some other bills that I know people are interested in, and I'm not sure where we are on all of them. But I will also say that for Pride Month, well, we've made, if you look at the sweep of history, we've made incredible progress in a relatively short period of time. If you look back at the Civil War, it took 100 years to get to the Civil Rights Bill in '64. And we're 60 years from that, and we still haven't addressed the underlying racism. For the LGBTQIA community, we have had a much shorter time frame when we have been out fighting, and we have achieved incredible things, including a national recognition of marriage equality. And which honestly, when I first ran 34 years ago, I would not have imagined that I would be voting for marriage equality. So as much as we can feel discouraged, and there are things to discourage us, no doubt, the rise of Proud Boys and Moms for Liberty, those things should not be unexpected. Every push forward in civil rights has gotten a pushback, but we are not daunted. We're not going back. And today, the president for D-Day celebrations or recognition, commemoration, I suppose, not a celebration, but a commemoration, said that, people fought, many died, to fight fascism. And we have a fight today, and we're not going to back down to bullies. Not when it comes to fascists, not when it comes to homophobes, not when it comes to people who now want to eliminate birth control. So these fights, in the final analysis, we have been successful by sticking together and fighting hard and fighting smart. And I guess if anybody has questions, if I don't want to completely derail the way in which you were planning on operating, but I don't want to just blather. I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Assembly Member. And I think we'd love to have questions. We'd love to have a real dialogue. We like talking. So I will recognize Paul Devlin.
Assemblyman Glick, thank you so much for coming. Part of the dialogue I'd like to have is understanding what politics is like today versus what it was like when you first came in or came out, because there was, it was last World AIDS Day that we asked members to tell stories about what it's like, living with HIV/AIDS. What do they know about it, whatever. And a lot of us that are of a different generation, older and remember the 80s, had our stories to tell, but a lot of the younger people had no stories to tell, which is a good thing, right? That HIV/AIDS is not prevalent in the forefront of the minds of the younger people. And so how does that come into play in politics? How does it come into play in the way you run for re-election, how you support other candidates, things like that?
Well, first of all, it was a long time ago, and I was the first out member of the legislature. And so people had stereotypes. It was 1991 when I arrived in Albany, and people had stereotypes, and I did my best not to fall into them, which was, a drag because I wasn't used to wearing skirts, but I wore skirted suits for the first 2 years.
That was your drag.
That was my drag, to very specifically try to break, the stereotypes were stupid, so they were easy to undermine. But there were very few women here. And I used to, in politics, you get some stock phrases sometimes. And I used to use the line, we haven't gotten to the homophobia because we haven't gotten past the misogyny. And while it was a bit of a throwaway line, it was so true. And it was only a couple of years before I got here when there was a women's room, a bathroom for women in the bar of the assembly, which is the assembly chamber and the offices on either side and the hallways. And so sometimes you couldn't leave the bar of the assembly, but if you had to go to the bathroom and you were a woman, you had to leave. And there were maybe a dozen. Now we're like 50-50 in, if you look at the Senate and Assembly together, both parties. So we're still, and the other thing is there were never women with children. In the last 10 years, we have had, the women who were here were women whose children had grown. There was one woman who had a child that was a little bit older in school, but not out of like junior high. And there was one. Everybody else was somebody who was older and whose kids had grown up already. So, and there weren't that many people of color, and they certainly weren't not a diverse array of the diaspora of both African and Latino communities. So it was very, very different. And that there were these guys who were big guys that sat in the back, and I called them the Sequoias because they were these huge old white guys that were sat in the back of the chamber because they couldn't sit in any of the shorter rows because they would block people. And there were fights. It took 5 years to get a bill passed that required insurance companies to cover contraceptives. They were, of course, covering Viagra, and the argument was Viagra is dealing with a medical problem. Pregnancy isn't a medical problem. So that's in the time I've been here. So I think the politics have changed in a lot of ways, most notably, and maybe not best, is social media. We have a very hard time. We used to sit in conference for hours, and there would be some leaks. Somebody would tell a reporter friend what was said by someone, or maybe just generally what was said. Now it is on social media before you ever leave the room, which has meant that leadership is fairly circumspect about what they feel they can share when things aren't fully formed. And of course, we know somebody says something, it's not in any way vetted, it may be inaccurate, and it's far more abusive because the bullying that occurs online is not exclusively directed to adolescent children. It is also directed at athletes and politicians and a whole lot of other folks. So I don't think we as a society, the technology is moving faster than we are. And I think that that's had a very, very serious undermining, as well as the pandemic. Before the pandemic, a new group of people got elected, they came in, they were physically in the chamber with us, they were in the members lounge, you got to talk to them, sidebar conversations, they got to ask you things, you got to know about them. Late night, you're talking about, somebody says, something about their family, and then you talk about their family and you get to know who they are. That has all changed. And so we have had two groups of people elected that have never really been there. This is the first session where they're with us, they're here, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle because we don't know each other, and politics is about personal relationships. And I'll say one last thing that's changed, and that was that there was a lot of homophobia, and it was all around AIDS. People were empowered to say the most ridiculous and offensive things because AIDS scared everybody, and it was for the others. It affected others, and that is very empowering and easy to judge. So that, fortunately, we're in a different place. I think the attempt to be, I think the notion that people are, we sometimes say in when we're worried about social change, that we don't want our government to be a race to the bottom, giving less and less to people. And we've seen that in a lot of areas, whether it's in education or healthcare. But the progressive race to be more progressive has not allowed people to think. And right now, there is no time, because of social media, there's no time between hearing about something and having to opine. You don't get to read, you don't get to think. Everything has to be an instantaneous response. So I hope that kind of answers some of your questions.
Other questions for Assemblymember Glick? Yes, Heather, go ahead. What's your question?
Hello, it's very nice to have you here. I was wondering, in terms of when you first entered, in terms of LGBT potential legislation or outcomes, which did you think were priorities that, in the back of your mind, you said, this is what I'm going to go for?
Well, I frequently point out that I was a member for 10 years before my basic civil rights were protected in every part of the state. So sometimes people say that I'm a little on the tough side, and I am, because I spent half my life as an outsider to society. I was an outlaw. my rights weren't protected. So the first thing was to try to get basic civil rights. And it took it was in the beginning of my third year that the assembly passed it. The general LGB, no T, basic civil rights, housing, public accommodation, employment. It was 10 years before it passed in the Senate. So it was hard to get on to the next thing.
Good point. Ruby, go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, Deb.
Hey,
How many openly gay members are there of the assembly?
we have Danny, who is retiring. We have me. We have Harry Bronson from Rochester. And obviously Tony Simone is our newest member.
Thank you.
And of course, in the Senate, we have Brad and Jabari Brisport. But we're set with the Senate and Assembly are kept in separate cages.
Do you find that there's more cooperation or less cooperation since when you first entered the legislature?
It varies. I mean, I think the women try to be a lot more collaborative. And there's definitely a stronger nucleus. But even within the women, there are, various striations. And I guess that's with any group. I think that as a Democratic conference, we're not as cohesive as we used to be. And that is a lot to do with, as I mentioned, the pandemic and having a lot of new people come in who haven't been sort of fully integrated. And they know either the classmate that they came in with or the people in their region. So everybody from Western New York sort of know each other. And a lot of them came in within a few years of each other. Manhattan was static for a very long time. And now we're, half the delegation is new. So it has, in some ways, people do try to work together, but I think it feels to me like a little less of a team, and I think most of that is the pandemic.
Hey, maybe can you give us some reasons for optimism looking forward?
Well, I'm a total optimist. I wouldn't be able to continue to do this if I didn't think that we constantly advance the ball down the field. We sometimes get a penalty and get, lose a few yards, but the world is so incredibly different now. When I was growing up, there was no one I felt I could tell. I knew who I was, but I felt forced to be someone I wasn't for a long time. And that passing for what you're not has a toll. And I think youngsters are very clear, and parents, by and large, at least within, I think there's probably kids who's in parts of the country that are in different situations, but where we are, parents are supportive of their kids. Their kids want to come out when they're, 10 years old. And their parents are right there for them. That is huge. That is an enormous sea change. the schools are generally supportive, the libraries, that there are materials available. Yes, now we have, I was almost said a bad word. We have fools who are trying, but they are acting out of heteronormative anxiety and insecurity. And we are on the right side of history, and we continue to be. And every area of endeavor, we are moving forward. And I know that people could be a little bit depressed about, that half the country, Mexico has elected a woman who was a climate scientist of Jewish heritage in an incredibly Catholic country. And, we have half our country supports a serial adulterer, sexual predator, now convicted felon, and we don't share the same reality. And that is what we have to confront. Growing up, and I'm looking around at the folks on the screen, so many of you will remember when there were just a few networks, and so we had shared reality. You didn't get a different fact from Walter Cronkite and a different fact from Chet Huntley. Now,
You're aging yourself, Deborah.
I don't care. I've reached the point I don't give a shit. Now I could say, oh, I remember when my grandmother watched them, but I remember. And now you have not just a lot of different networks, you have cable stations, you have internet stations, you have Twitter, and there's 6 other platforms, each one more committed to crazier and crazier conspiracy theories. This is the challenge of our time, to get back to a place where there's some sense of shared reality. And the Orange Menace, his person said it, we have alternative facts. We all thought that was a friggin' joke. She meant it. And so that's the challenge, I think, for all of us. And people always say, well, you just have, I do know people who are not just a conservative, but maybe a little on the wacky side, not just conservative, but they're almost over the line. But you can find a way to talk to them about, like pets or something. And all of a sudden they're not crazy. And it'll be a lot of hard work. And putting the genie back in the bottle is maybe not totally possible. But there are people with whom you cannot have a conversation. I talk, and look, the Republicans that we have here in the legislature, in the assembly, are mostly not nuts. We don't have the same worldview, but they're not, and you could see that we function in a way that they don't function in Washington. People have to reach each other on a human level. And we all are in places where we don't interact with too many of them. I mean, I do, but you may not. And we have to do a little bit more work in that arena, which is why getting on buses and door knocking in other places, in other districts other than our own, where we, are sort of a little bit more safe, is a good thing to do. And phone banking.
Which is a wonderful segue to a reminder, and maybe to let you know that our club has adopted 2 congressional districts, New York 4 and New York 17, to try to flip them back to the Democratic column. So we will.
Is 4 Schuyler?
4 is Gillen.
Gillen, okay.
And then Mondaire.
And Mondaire, yes, 17. I will tell you, I served with Mike Lawler. He's very smooth and very smart, and he must go. He's
Okay.
dangerous.
So we will be getting on buses, and we've been Jackie Lowry on this call has been doing a great job with our postcarding efforts, and so we have heard that call loud and clear to go out and make personal contact with folks. So thank you for that.
Well, if Jackie's doing phone postcarding, I have a friend who, an older friend in Penn South who I would like to connect you. So Jackie, call my office and I'll hook you up with somebody who is anxious to do something out of her own, desperation, but isn't able to do, street work. So.
Deborah, what's her first name, just so I can connect Jackie to Tracy? Do you know?
Oh,
Who's
you
in
mean,
Penn South?
what was that?
Who's the name of the person in Penn? Just the first name of the person.
Oh,
in Penn South?
Lucy.
Lucy. Okay, Jackie, I'll connect you to Tracy.
So thank you again so much. And this has just been really very inspiring. And I think we'd love to continue the conversation whenever you have time or the inclination to come back to another meeting.
Well, I appreciate it because, and it was just perfect timing because they just called the Rules Committee.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Pride, Deborah. Thank you for everything.
Happy Pride.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, that was really great. I've received word that Tom Duane unfortunately will not be able to join us this evening. He apologizes, but something unexpected came up, and so he won't be able to join us. But we had a terrific conversation with Deborah Glick, and so I hope you all enjoyed that. The next thing I wanted to bring up from the agenda is Deborah mentioned congestion pricing. The other thing more for Hell's Kitchen, I want to make sure everybody knows that the Port Authority will be making a presentation on the Port Authority bus terminal renovation next Wednesday and at CB4. This is a $10 billion project. It's going to affect our lives for the next 8 to 10 years at least. And it's very important, I think, for anybody who lives within spitting distance of the Port Authority, which is most of Hell's Kitchen, to attend, if at all possible. It's Wednesday, June 12th at 6:30. If you want to be there in person, it's at Hartley House, 413 West 46th. And there's also a possibility to attend via Zoom. Now, I'm going to call on Paul because I believe you're on land use, right? So you can tell us more.
Not only on it, I'm the co-chair of the committee, so I get to sit there in the front of the room and listen to everybody. Yeah, so the Hell's Kitchen land use is looking at this. There's been a Port Authority bus terminal working group on Community Board 4 for many, many years. The Hell's Kitchen Self Coalition did a whole series of workshops and sort of charrette groups to figure out what the community would want and what is, what's needed. The Port Authority bus terminal transports 250,000 people a day into our neighborhood. And when that was built in the 1950s, it sort of bifurcated the neighborhood. They just came in, built the facility, and broke up the neighborhood. So two of the things that we as a board have been really pushing hard for is to find out if we can figure out a way to reknit the community back together, not have any eminent domain take place, and how do we get the buses off of the streets? Like right now, buses come out of the tunnel, circle around the streets, go into the facility. So those were sort of our biggest requests, demands, and aspirations. And it seems that we have been somewhat successful at that. They are presenting on the 12th, and it's going to be the massing without final design components. But this is the period at which we can continue to make some comments and suggestions on revisions that need to be made. So it is going to be important that people come, and the community board has been very vocal on, like, from where the grass is planted on the overpasses to Dyer Ave to how tall the commercial towers will be on 8th Avenue. Like, the range is pretty extreme. So we are also, though, under a lot of pressure to get this approved because much like the Third Harbor Tunnel, the Hudson River Tunnel, the Gateway Tunnel, if Biden doesn't win re-election, we may lose the federal funding to get this done, and it will be another 4 or 5 years of an under-maintained, poorly operated bus facility. And we also don't want to have the attitude of the Port Authority be much like this is like a LaGuardia or JFK terminal, because it is in our neighborhood. So we want to integrate a transportation hub that moves 250,000 people a day, but make it feel like it's integrated into our neighborhood.
Okay, great. And I put the link in the chat, but we'll also get it out in email for
And I
people.
see Heather's hand went up. Heather, is this a question about the Port Authority?
Yes, is the CB4 spending the entire evening on this presentation?
We have, that's the only item on, I got the agenda today and I think I added something else, but it would become after that. So Port Authority bus terminal representatives will be there to make the presentation, and then we'll open up for dialogue after the presentation and however long that takes. I will advise that the Hartley House acoustics are very challenging. So if you're tuning in online, be prepared for, some audible issues or concerns. And so if you can come in person, you might learn more and see better than if you do it on Zoom, but we do stream everything through Zoom and YouTube.
Okay, Stephanie, go ahead.
So can you remind us of that date, please, Paul?
I think it's June 12th at 6:30. I'm looking at my calendar. I forget what day I'm doing anything, so I have to look. Yes, 6:30 on June 12th, Wednesday, June 12th, 6:30, Hartley House.
Thank you.
On 46th.
Hartley House is, 413 West 46th. All right, so that brings us to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports at this moment?
Just to say that I think everybody did an incredible job on the food festival, and I put in Slack some of the, some of the numbers that we got from it. The other thing I wanted to mention is that M&O's and end of the year celebration and also agenda is going to be at my place June 18th. We start at 6 o'clock, and there's going to be lots to eat and drink, and so everyone's invited. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. And I also want to thank Stephanie Jones. We had a great Mother's Day flower sale. And although we did get rained out on Sunday, Saturday went really well. And so thank you to Stephanie for that. Both Stephanie and Heather have done yeoman's work in outreach to the community. And so once again, thank you. Any other?
Can I just add thank you to Liz Keefe for your volunteer time and all of our volunteers that came to the flower sale. Your time is very, very appreciated.
Yes, where would we be without our volunteers? In fact, all of us are volunteers, so that's great. Any other committee reports? Okay, any new business? All right, so our next general meeting will be August 1st, 2024. We will not have a July meeting. We meet on the first Thursday of the month. The first Thursday of July is Independence Day. So we will not be meeting on Independence Day. So happy Independence Day. That does not mean we aren't doing things. We have the postcarding that Jackie talked about. There will be opportunities for phone banking. We'll have newsletters. We have our incredible Instagram account that Alita keeps us all up to date on various events. So keep an eye on email and Instagram. even though it's the summer and we won't be officially meeting, we're still very active. So without further ado, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I see a motion from Marietta. Do I see a second? Julie is seconding. So all in favor of adjourning? Great. Then we are adjourned. Hey. See you later.